Good day, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, How to Manage Holiday Shipping in 2020, an E-Commerce Survival Guide. If you have concerns about how to navigate the ever-changing shipping landscape as we head into Q4, you've come to the right place. We're going to go deep today and help you formulate a strategy for managing your shipping and logistics in order to ensure that your goods get delivered to customers on time. I'm Remy, and I will be your moderator today. I'm joined by two esteemed shipping and logistics experts and Packlane partners. George, who is co-founder of ShipBob, and Matt, who's co-founder of Second Marathon. We've got a lot to cover here today. We'll begin with introductions, then we'll go into a discussion based on the most pressing questions and concerns we all get from our customers related to shipping and logistics this holiday season. Then we'll do a Q&A with webinar attendees. After that, we'll learn a bit more about ShipBob and Second Marathon and the services they provide. Finally, I will discuss Packlane's new production times and some very important holiday order cutoff dates that you do not want to miss. Matt Hertz is co-founder of e-commerce operations consultancy Second Marathon. He spent his career building, scaling, and managing complex e-commerce supply chain operations. He launched Second Marathon in 2017 as a way to support the next generation of e-commerce brands as they attempt to solve supply chain challenges. Matt began his operations career as part of the founding teams at Rent the Runway and Birchbox. He then joined Ship as a VP, overseeing relationships with the broader e-commerce ecosystem. George is ShipBob co-founder and head of partnerships. He advocates for merchant empowerment by working with partners and platforms to develop a best-in-class ecosystem of solutions for e-commerce merchants. Previously, George ensured ShipBob's signature first-rate e-commerce shipping services by establishing strategically located fulfillment centers throughout the US. Since ShipBob's formation, George has launched and operationalized fulfillment centers in Chicago, New York City, LA, San Francisco, and Dallas. 2020 will be the biggest year ever for e-commerce. Everyone is incredibly excited for this opportunity to generate a lot of sales and acquire a lot of new customers. It's also bringing with it a number of complexities and challenges for e-commerce companies. Here at Packlane, we're feeling that, and we have done a number of things to make adjustments to the way we operate, and I'll be talking about that a bit more at the end. We have made a decision to put our customers above everything, and that's one thing that we are recommending to folks is to think about the customer experience first. And that brings us to our first question. How is COVID-19 impacting shipping, and what should we expect heading into Q4? George, what do you think?
Well, yeah, it's certainly been an extraordinary year. And COVID has impacted shipping, and in some ways it hasn't. Clearly, there have been new considerations for both carriers and merchants, but the ability to order a product online and have that product arrive at your doorstep has been fairly consistent even throughout the COVID crisis. And I think it speaks to the logistics infrastructure that has been built out by both government and private enterprise. That being said, it also adds a new layer of considerations for merchants, whereas previously merchants would find a fulfillment partner and think that under almost any scenario that they're going to stick with that partner and they're going to handle everything. Now merchants need to consider black swan-like events where, hey, if there's a pandemic or some sort of emergency and my fulfillment company can't operate, how will I get my products into my customers' hands? And so now you have merchants considering contingencies, looking for 3PLs that perhaps may have multiple locations or having a backup 3PL in their back pocket, which prior to COVID-19, very little merchants took that into consideration. So in a lot of ways, it has changed things, but the good news is that the majority of how pick, pack, ship, and getting products to your door operates has remained consistent, albeit some delays.
it's great to be reminded of that. The infrastructure available today it's incredible just how robust it really is. Okay, over to you, Matt. How is COVID-19 impacting shipping, and what should we expect heading into Q4?
Yeah, absolutely. It's been such a dynamic year. If you asked most brands, probably all brands back in, January, February, or kind of, early Q1, what they were forecasting for Q2, Q3 volumes, none of them would have guessed that their volumes would have been where they ended up on average as an industry. A number of the brands that, we've been supporting have seen volumes literally 3, 4, 5x, in Q2, as a multiple of what they were initially forecasting. And it's just extraordinary. Brands who had, what they were planning to be 3 or 4 or even 6 months of inventory, inside their 3PLs, saw that inventory sell out in a matter of days, if not weeks. So it's been incredibly challenging to plan, even before the inventory gets to the warehouse and you pick, pack, and ship it, determining how to get the product, for many of these brands from overseas manufacturers to the warehouse, and then ensuring that product is still on the shelves. So it's been incredibly challenging in that. And, despite the significant growth and sort of revenue benefit of seeing e-commerce explode, it's come with some significant challenges, as George also alluded to. And then I think, further downstream, on the pick, pack, and ship. So whether the fulfillment, has been done in-house, if you have your own operations, or if you outsource to a 3PL like ShipBob, a lot of these, 3PLs have experienced challenge, having labor in the building, ensuring that people show up to work. Maybe they've been in parts of the country that have been particularly hard hit by COVID, and, also the carriers, right? I mean, we think of lots of robotics and drones and automation, but, with many 3PLs and, the UPSs and FedExes of the world, it's still a lot of, or mostly, humans that are operating in, naturally, COVID has been something that has impacted us. So, there's been a little bit of a push and pull where, demand has been off the charts, but supply of, logistics, infrastructure, and labor has certainly been challenged.
They sure have, and they're going to be increasingly challenged the further we get into this. So, George, you guys at ShipBob have actually been tracking carrier performance, and given the number of customers you have and the number of boxes that they are shipping, you have a very unique data set, and I'm sure you guys have found out some very interesting things. So please share what you guys have learned and the highlights of everything that's going on with that study.
Yeah, so thank you for pointing that out. Early on, back in March, when COVID hit, we asked ourselves, what can we do at this point to add value to merchants, to the broader e-commerce community? And we sit on and utilize a lot of data that we get to see, because we're shipping out packages for thousands of e-commerce merchants. And so we decided to publish 2 different websites. For those of you who don't know, we have trends.shipbob.com, which shows which products are moving out the door. Really interesting to see back in March, where the usual catalysts like jewelry and cosmetics and nutraceuticals kind of fell off the map, and things like products like baby formula rose 800% in a matter of days. So that was really interesting to see. And then more recently, we've published carriers.shipbob.com, which presents to merchants in the e-commerce community how the carriers are doing from the moment the order is picked to the moment that the order is delivered to the doorstep or to the door of the customer of our merchants. And it's been really interesting to see. Obviously, when COVID hit, all of the carriers suffered. And the amount of time that it took to deliver packages was considerably higher than pre-COVID levels. Specifically, USPS was very interesting. They had been lagging severely up until about 4, 5, 6 weeks ago, when just after the PR storm that hit them, all of a sudden, once they were in the spotlight, their transit times went back to pre-COVID levels, which was interesting. So we use that data to decide in our algorithm which carriers we're going to consistently ship the most with based on the designations coming in of the packages. The only carrier at this point that hasn't come back to pre-COVID levels based on our data is DHL, but FedEx, UPS, USPS are now pretty much shipping at what they were February and January earlier this year.
Well, that's great to hear. USPS in particular, they got a bad rap. I thought it was a little bit unfair personally, but that's just me. So I think a lot of our guests today would be very excited to head over to those two websites that you listed. And for anyone who does, how can they best make use of that data when they're looking it over?
Yeah, that's a great question. You know, there's different variables involved for different merchants or for different people in the e-commerce community. My recommendation would be to go in there, digest the data on a macro level for what it is, and then specifically locate what it is that you want to find out and see if you can dive into it and gather information from what's presented for your own needs.
Perfect. And what are those two URLs again?
Trends.shipbob.com and carriers.shipbob.com.
So that's actually a really great segue into our next question, which is what policy changes are specific carriers making, including USPS, UPS, FedEx, and DHL? And we're going to start with you, Matt.
Yeah, I mean, you know, just to sort of echo some of the sentiment that George shared, you know, as a result of some of the time and transit delays that, you know, many of the carriers have been facing over the last, you know, 6 or 8 months, and some of them still facing, you know, delayed transits. You know, we've seen a number of carriers actually make some pretty significant changes to their, you know, customer-facing policies. So, you know, on the one hand, I believe all carriers, FedEx, or, you know, certainly FedEx, UPS, the Postal Service, and DHL have announced increased surcharges ahead of peak season. So they're kind of like peak season surcharges. You know, in prior years, you know, FedEx and UPS have rolled out holiday surcharges or, you know, peak season surcharges to help support them with the increased cost of servicing holiday volume. This year, those surcharges have come, you know, earlier, and I believe for many of these carriers, they've already announced their second wave of surcharges. So, you know, it's been pretty significant. The one interesting thing is that the Postal Service also announced, you know, peak season or holiday surcharges, which, you know, I haven't been in the business for too long, but certainly over the last dozen or so years, I don't recall a time where the Postal Service has announced, you know, surcharges. The Postal Service is sort of famous for like no strings attached, no accessorials, you know, just very clean pricing. And, you know, this Q4 will be a little different for the Postal Service. So pricing has increased considerably for, you know, shippers of all sizes, both, you know, small businesses as well as enterprise level, you know, kind of Fortune 500 type shippers. So that's the first thing. The second thing that has been really interesting, you know, which sort of goes hand in hand with the increased volume that the carriers have been seeing is, you know, we've heard from, you know, a number of brands and certainly some that we've supported that, you know, a couple of the carriers have actually ceased onboarding new customers. So, you know, I don't want to say any names because I haven't seen any press from carriers, you know, official press saying we're no longer taking new customers. So I don't want to spread rumors, but, you know, certainly we've seen definitively that a couple carriers in particular, you know, George mentioned a few of them, and, you know, all I'll say is some of the carriers that George mentioned fall into this cohort. They are no longer taking new customers because demand is so high. You know, they're already sort of at their, you know, peak capacity, and we're not even, you know, in the thick of Q4. So, you know, I was talking to one carrier a few weeks ago, and they were at about 95% capacity. And this was, you know, early August, right? Just a boring old summer day in August, you know, they were at 95% capacity. So the way that they're thinking is, you know, over the next couple months, you know, into, you know, Cyber Week and the weeks leading up to Christmas, clearly volume is going to be higher then than it is in a boring old summer day in August. So if there's a lift of 20, 30, 40%, it just sort of comes down to mathematics, and they're unable to, service that volume. So, they've tried to be somewhat proactive to say, hey, we're actually not onboarding any new customers until volume settles down. And even with our existing customer base, we're going to have a serious conversation with some of the shippers to see if we can basically create limits on the amount of volume that we're willing to pick up. So I've never seen that before. I've never seen a carrier say, we don't want your volume. We're going to be unable to satisfy it. So it's already been an exceptional, couple quarters in the logistics world, and there's going to be a lot of interesting headlines over the next few weeks.
Thanks so much for those insights, Matt. I personally have heard that DHL e-commerce has stopped taking on new customers, but that is unconfirmed. So on the subject of policy changes, Matt covered it very thoroughly, but is there anything you'd like to add, George?
Yeah, I agree. Matt provided some awesome detail there. It's been interesting. USPS has been very much in the spotlight recently, and we're watching that closely. They've been, they've had budgetary issues that they're dealing with, and legislative issues. So we're watching that situation closely. They've been asked to do a lot more with a lot less, and a lot of the other major carriers like FedEx, UPS, and DHL utilize USPS for last mile for their kind of a cheaper service. So if you think about DHL e-commerce, SmartPost, SurePost by UPS, and SmartPost by FedEx, they feed into USPS for the last mile. So we're watching those transit times really closely and to see if they're affected by the issues that USPS might be experiencing right now. And it's going to be really interesting to see in Q4, when we do have an even higher lift than we've experienced already in 2020, how that's going to play out. We're keeping a close eye on it. But, so far there's a lot up in the air, especially regarding USPS, and it's an election year. Nothing has been decided. But as Matt mentioned in his answer, that the carriers are being proactive and kind of ensuring themselves against the unknown.
I'm sure they are. Okay, so speaking of carriers, what about working with local carriers? Is that an option that anyone should be considering? And what would be a scenario where someone should look into a local carrier?
I think it's a very relevant avenue for merchants, fulfillment companies to look at local carriers. It's a part of our responsibility to work with the carriers to continually grab volume discounts as our business grows and we work with more merchants. But there's only so low that can go. And I think that there's a lot of untapped potential in working with regional and local carriers who may have shipping lanes to where you're sending a lot of packages. So we at ShipBob view it as a relevant avenue.
Okay. Matt, anything to add?
Yeah, I think just, generally, it's the theme of creating redundancy in your supply chain where, as George said, local and regional carriers serve a really great purpose in the market. For some brands, they are, fairly limiting in that they are, by definition, regional. So they can't handle a package from New York to, California, as an example. But, if there are ways to kind of start to piece together this puzzle of different carriers so that if, for example, FedEx is your primary carrier and they have challenges around your facility, in that region, maybe it does make sense to work with, a smaller, more regional carrier to, basically siphon off, that segment of your distribution.
Okay, let's talk a bit more about how to approach picking the right carrier or the right combination of carriers. I think some of our attendees today probably have never worked with regional carriers. So let's say someone is not entirely sure if they have the right carriers and they're looking to evaluate their current choice of carriers or potentially, look at it from the beginning and really think about the best solution going into Q4. How would you recommend that someone approach that? We're going to start with you on this one, Matt.
Great. Yeah. Excuse me. Typically there's, a few key variables in, how you would evaluate the carrier decision. Certainly if you're working with a 3PL like ShipBob, they help you make that decision, as do other 3PLs. But, if you have the fulfillment, if you do it yourself, if you're just maybe a smaller business and starting up, how do you make this overwhelming decision? So, typically, given that shipping is a significant line item, it's a significant percentage of your top line revenue, the actual cost to get it to the customer, it demands a lot of attention. Excuse me. And often, customers are driven by the carrier that's the lowest cost, right? The lowest cost solution. And you sometimes neglect, some of the other aspects of, different carriers, such as time in transit. So, I don't think I have to, explain this to, today's audience, but, obviously with, companies like Amazon creating this, perception that everything needs to get to customers really quickly, whether you buy into that fully or not, I think we can all agree that faster is better. In, the year 2020 e-commerce, where getting it to the customer in 2 or 3 or even 4 days is, probably what you need to achieve versus, 5, 6, 7 days. But there is a trade-off, right? I can get, if I ship from, the Northeast, let's take New York, for example, and, I have a lot of customers in California or on the West Coast, I can get product to them in 2 days every time, but it's going to cost me a significant amount to get product, to customers in 2 days versus, I can kind of ship it, the slow method, use some of these, deferred solutions, some of these postal work share programs, for example, or, more traditional ground networks where it might cost me a fraction of like 2-day airing or 2-day expressing volume from one coast to another, but it's going to come at the sacrifice of time in transit. So the actual amount of days that it takes to get to a customer's door. So, you sort of think of a scale where like the faster the transit, the higher the cost. The slower the transit, the more economical it is. So it's a little bit of push and pull of what you're trying to achieve. Now, I think the question that, I often pose to brands is, are you selling something that's a commodity? And the way I sort of define a commodity, I'm not the marketing guru, so please take this with a grain of salt. But the way that I sort of define a commodity is, is this something that is sold on Amazon, right? Or is it something that Amazon can rip off? If you are a brand and truly a brand in its truest sense, where there's only one place to purchase your product, on your own website, maybe it's hosted by Shopify or another order platform, then you may not need to necessarily get product to customers in 1 or 2 days, because if they want your product, there's only one place to get it, right? But if you sell something that is, very commoditized, like, I'm looking around my desk here, a laptop stand or an iPhone charger, where, there's dozens and dozens, if not, thousands of places where you can purchase that product, including Amazon. It'll be really challenging to promote to customers that, you'll get the product to them in 5 or 6 days when, Amazon will get it to them probably later that afternoon. So, I think the long and short of it is that there's no one size fits all. You need to think a little holistically of what your objectives are from a customer experience, and from there determine, what type of, what does your shipping network look like, and what carriers and services do you want to leverage to satisfy that?
Yeah, I think that's a great and pragmatic way of looking at it. And you called it out earlier from the ShipBob vantage point, you called it out earlier in your reply, Matt, is that we essentially take care of that for merchants. We work with all the major carriers, FedEx, UPS, USPS, DHL, all their subsidiary services, as well as some regional carriers. And we have an algorithm that finds out, okay, what would be the fastest, cheapest way for this package to get to its destination based on the designation that it came in with. And we also look at macro factors such as the carrier's .shipbob.com information to find out, well, okay, what do the transit times look like for this carrier? It may be cheaper, but they've slipped in the last couple of weeks. And so we'll take that into account at the point of when the label is made.
So, and a related question about choosing the right carrier. We at Packlane have a very diverse customer base. So the attendees right now, we've got everything from solopreneurs to small businesses who are doing thousands of shipments a month to some folks who are doing tens of thousands of shipments a month. We've covered surcharges in depth at this point. Is there anything people can do to actually avoid them, or are we just stuck here, living with them for the remainder of the year?
Yeah, it's difficult. I think surcharges, accessorials, all the extra costs. It's always negotiable with UPS and FedEx. They have different degrees of willingness to negotiate. I tend to look at things a little more holistically where, I've tried to avoid, helping brands negotiate any one particular surcharge. I think you sort of have to think about the relationship, more holistically and truly as a relationship. So what I mean by that is, or, I should say partnership. So what I mean by that is, look at the total agreement, look at service levels, on-time performance. Do you get anything back if they, miss their, guaranteed delivery time? And think about ways to, enhance the partnership or deepen the partnership while also, being able to, benefit yourself if you as a brand continue to grow, right? If you're providing the carriers with more volume, there should be some correlation with, the more you spend with the carriers, the greater the discount you get. So, given the pressures that FedEx and UPS specifically have been under, this year, the reason why they're rolling out these new surcharges is to support the added cost in their infrastructure. So, to call up your UPS or FedEx rep or, email them and say, hey, we're unhappy with this, $2 surcharge or $1 surcharge or whatever it is for yourself, please waive it or please eliminate that. I don't think you're going to have much success with that conversation, but, I think if you take this opportunity to have, a more collegial conversation with them saying, reviewing the data, showing how your business has maybe significantly increased over the year. And, the last contract you have is from last year when you were maybe a fraction of the size today. I think there might be more willingness to negotiate where maybe that surcharge stays, but they give you a little bit back on your base discount. So I think thinking about the entire picture and taking a more strategic approach to contract negotiation will serve you better than, picking up the phone after you get a notice from FedEx saying the surcharges are here and trying to outright eliminate that.
That is really good advice.
Yeah.
Is there anything else to add on surcharges and how to reduce or avoid them?
So there's a lot of them that you just can't do much about. Luckily, things like fuel surcharge, we haven't had to worry about that much recently. But I think the two main ones that come to mind is the address surcharge. If there's anything you can do to mitigate having not having incorrect addresses come through, that'll save you money. If the package is addressed to the wrong, if there's like a number off or the wrong street name, there will be a surcharge for that. So a lot of this is already done digitally in like your Shopify store or your Squarespace store. But if there's anything you can do to mitigate, the address being incorrect, that'll be helpful. And then there's also the volumetric surcharges. And so packing efficiently your goods, I think, is important. A lot of people don't know, like the way that the carriers charge nowadays is by and large part how much space it takes on like a truck or some sort of transportation mechanism. And if you're shipping something out like kombucha bottles, and you can pack them in tightly, that's going to help you versus maybe having a little extra space in the box and kind of leaving it so that it's not as tightly packed. So efficiently packing your products will save you money in the long run for sure, and help you avoid surcharges.
Excellent advice. So how can e-commerce companies go about inventory management? We talked a lot about shipping, but there's also a concern that people will lack inventory. Is there anything folks can do to take preventative measures?
Sure. Yeah, I mean, inventory is extremely challenging. And, I think I alluded to a little bit of this earlier in the session, but, one of the challenges that many brands have had is actually getting inventory, stateside, assuming it is manufactured overseas, and understanding the right amount. So, I'm not a manufacturing or, planning, person. Those are certainly not, a little outside of the scope of my competency, but, one thing I do, or I have suggested to, many brands that I've supported over the last couple months specifically has been order, so long as cash flow can support it, order as much as you can, get inventory over here as soon as possible, because who knows how COVID will react over the next few months. We saw it hit, Asia and, China specifically before it hit the US, and China was shut down, and that impacted the supply chain and getting product here. So, while fingers crossed that won't happen again, this fall or winter, I think creating that resiliency will be really important. So order as much as you can, get product here, even if it means, having a little excess storage, maybe picking up, excess fees, as a result of storage. Just get it here so we have it here to start taking sales. And, I think the second part of that is, e-commerce for Q4 will be extraordinary. And my humble opinion is that Q4 this year will be greater than Q4 this year will be greater than Q4 next year, which is really weird to think about. And, maybe that comment won't age well. And certainly I hope it does not. I hope next year is bigger than this year, but, there is a very good chance that this year will be bigger than next year. And, knock on wood, hopefully, that's because, we have a vaccine for COVID and people are more comfortable going out and shopping and purchasing offline, although e-commerce will continue to grow year over year. So this year will be extraordinary. With, the cooler weather hitting much of the country, people are going to be less willing to, go outside. Who knows what happens with, COVID over the next few months, but, I think be prepared and, take your, best case scenario or bullish case scenario and probably add a multiplier of 1.5 or 2x on that. And that's what you could probably expect your Q4 volume to be.
It's absolutely incredible. Such a huge opportunity to sell a lot of product. George, anything else to add on the topic of inventory management?
Yeah, that was a great technical analysis, Matt. I think that I concur, start early, order your boxes early on, get ahead of it. And I also think it's critical to communicate to your partners throughout the supply chain what your expectations are and confirm with them that they think that they're able to meet your expectations. And I think that if you start early and you communicate and have conversations with your partners, you're in better shape than most than going into it blindly, just hoping that things work out.
Great. And our last question for today is, what's the best way to ensure goods are delivered to customers on time?
Yeah, I think, as George said in his last response, I am anticipating significant carrier failures, even if they're intermittent. I think all carriers are going to have significant struggle this holiday season. So, it's like that famous quote in Jerry Maguire, "Help me, help you." So, this is the carrier talking to you, like, try getting that volume in their system as early as possible, because today they have a lot more capacity than they're going to have tomorrow. November 15th, they're going to have a lot more capacity than they will December 1st, right? So to the extent that it's possible, and, I've been hearing this from, a number of brands, more so on the marketing side, which I'm not too close to, but, some of the chatter I've heard is that they are starting holiday promotions much earlier, right? I was reading an article earlier this week that Amazon is having their Prime Day in October of this year. And at first I was a little surprised that they'd have something so close to, the traditional, sort of Christmas holiday time. But, the more I thought about it, having it October 13th and 14th, I believe, will actually push up the amount of holiday purchasing. So in other words, I gather, I'll probably do the same. Like, I will purchase Christmas gifts and holiday gifts in October versus waiting until, November, December to purchase those gifts. So Amazon's trying to hedge a little bit there. And I think, other brands and e-commerce companies should, think about it the same. So try to help the carrier, like, don't just assume or hope that the carriers are going to do their job and, perform on time and, get packages when they need to be. Because the worst thing you can do as a brand is promise that a holiday gift gets there in time for Christmas and it shows up December 26th, right? That's like, the harshest mistake in e-commerce. Just, help the carriers and, try to promote early.
That is fantastic advice. George, anything else to add on the topic of how to get your goods delivered on time, which is just mission critical right now?
Mission critical, absolutely. Every year we watch when peak season kicks into gear, and we can pinpoint that specific day because we see a distinct change in the volume. I think last year, every year that we've been in business, which is 6 years now, that it keeps moving up. Last year, I think it was November 13th. This year, we're expecting it to be even earlier than that. So my answer echoes a lot like my previous answer. You know, talk to your partners, set expectations, confirm their ability to hit on your expectations, and start early.
All right, we have a lot of questions coming in right now. We're not going to have time to take all of them, unfortunately, but we are going to do 3 for each speaker, and we're going to start with George, and then we're going to do 3 more format. George, how do you work with merchants that want to create an unboxing experience? Perhaps they want to use custom boxes or have things positioned a certain way, or even include marketing inserts in their shipments.
Yeah, that's a great question. So that's been a core tenet of our DNA since we started as a company. Our philosophy is that we want to give brands with inspired ideas an ability to create a relationship with the customers that they're shipping their products to. So you'll see there's a lot of 3PLs and fulfillment companies out there that don't want to deal with that. It's something that we are very much for. We feel like the success of the brands that we work with is heavily weighted toward the relationship they're able to create with their customers. And so if merchants want to come to us and use their branded box that they've ordered from Packlane, or have marketing inserts that have offers and deals, we're about it, and we'll find a way to make that work. There may be some instances in which we'd have to charge a little bit more, but it's always been something that we've offered and that brands have utilized to a great degree of success. Yeah, so it's something that we're very open to, and we love to see it. We love to see brands succeed, and we love to, you know, it's a significant contrast to the Amazon experience. I'll just call them out on that. You know, it's like people want to build businesses on Amazon, and that's totally relevant. But at the end of the day, that customer email address belongs to Amazon. The product comes in an Amazon box. Any inserts in there are Amazon related merch. So you can sell products, but can you really build a relationship with your merchant? It's a lot harder to do than if you can kind of curate the experience of when they receive the package and how everything looks. And so, yeah, we'd love to help merchants with that aspect of their business.
Couldn't have said it better myself. At Packlane, we, of course, strongly advocate for custom packaging and creating amazing unboxing experiences. So
you guys do it well.
Thank you. Next up for you, George. Does ShipBob own and operate all of its fulfillment centers?
So ShipBob has 11 fulfillment centers throughout the world. We've got 10 in North America, 9 in the United States, 1 in Canada, and 1 in Kilkenny, Ireland. We've operated our first 5-6 fulfillment centers in the United States, and then we leveraged our software to work with partners who run fulfillment companies that are welcome to the idea of working with ShipBob. So we don't own and operate all of the fulfillment centers that ShipBob products go to, but we are very closely affiliated with our partners who do operate those fulfillment centers. They adapt our software, they adapt our SLAs. We come in, train their employees, and they become great partners of ours. And it has allowed us to expand very quickly. And why that's important is the more coverage that we have with fulfillment centers, the more opportunity for merchants to distribute their inventory and thus create a stronger logistics network to get their products to their customers cheaper and quicker than if they were shipping in fewer facilities or from just one facility.
It's a no-brainer to look into using ShipBob if you're an e-commerce company. We have lots of Packlane customers who are happy ShipBob customers. The last one for you here, George. How is Q4 peak season this year prep different from the previous years, considering the current swell that we're seeing?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question for whoever's asking it. So it's very different. We've been talking in this conversation about how the expectation based on real data, not just like guessing and hoping, is that Q4 is going to be very busy this year. So the challenge is having the bandwidth in our network necessary to keep up with the demand. And so that's started earlier than in previous years, making sure that we talk to our partners, that we are straight on what our expectations are and what we're expecting in terms of volumes that we're sending throughout the network. The main focus this year is on bandwidth and to making sure that we're able to do what we say we're going to do for merchants and fulfill our obligation to get their products into their customers' hands.
So interesting. Okay, thank you, George. And we're going to hand it over to you, Matt, for the final three. Thoughts on Postal Service, and what do you make of the delays that were revealed over the last couple months?
Yeah, sure. So, we sort of addressed this earlier in the session, but, maybe just to share, another tidbit or two. I think George kind of hit on it, particularly with his suggestion to check out, I think it's carriers.shipbob.com or, yeah, correct. Where ShipBob's doing a fantastic job in sort of managing or monitoring transit times week over week. And, as he pointed out, the Postal Service has improved significantly over the last month or so since, the new Postmaster General has, come under some fire. So, as a customer of the Postal Service, as a shipper, as an e-commerce brand, you should be thrilled that transit times have reverted back to more normal. I don't think they're quite as fast or premium as they were pre-COVID, but certainly, a day and a half or so better than they were even as recently as a couple months ago. So I think that's a really good sign. We'll see what happens over the next couple months. Obviously the election is, really at the beginning of, the peak Q4. So, I don't want to politicize my response, but depending on the outcome there, that might create, maybe a tailwind to accelerate some of the changes at the Postal Service or otherwise. So there's definitely a lot of risk. And I think playing back to our earlier discussion on creating redundancy in your supply chain, having another carrier or two as backup, I think will be, a really smart decision.
It is great to see the U.S. Postal Service beginning to make a comeback. Next up, my 3PL was shut down for a period of time at the beginning of COVID, and I fear that it could happen again in the fall during the busiest part of the year. What can we do to avoid this pain again?
Yeah, I heard from most 3PLs or customers of 3PLs that their partner was either shut down wholly for a period of time. It could have been days, or in some cases a couple weeks. For many other 3PLs, even Amazon, if you sold through Amazon, through FBA, fulfillment by Amazon, or multi-channel fulfillment by Amazon, they were not shipping goods that they deemed to be non-essential. So, again, looking around my desk, a laptop, a stand, or, a coffee mug, those were non-essentials, right? They were prioritizing cleaning supplies and PPE and food and grocery and other products like that. So, it's a serious concern. I don't want to guess what the next few months look like in terms of COVID. And, I certainly hope that, 3PLs and frankly, the world as a whole, this country even, suffers, the challenges that we did, 6 or 7 months ago at the beginning of this. But, again, I think, I can't stress this enough, but having backup, right? When I was studying operations management earlier on in my career, I kept hearing from some folks this idea of just in time, right? Like just in time is sort of an operational principle that you learn in school, where, you should only have as much as you need to fulfill that day's orders, right? So stay very lean. And then I heard a quote from someone a couple months ago. I forget who to attribute it to, but they said something along the lines of, just in time is no longer what we should be thinking about. We should be thinking about just in case, right? So, have an extra 3PL as a backup, right? Negotiate that contract with them contingent on, requiring excess space, right? Like bring your product in and have your product stored at, an overflow facility somewhere in the country. So you have it just in case, have a second or third carrier, have your contract already signed and, held until you need that carrier. Like create this redundancy because there will be failures and you don't want to be, a brand that, is challenged due to, failures outside of your control.
All right, that wraps up the Q&A portion. Thank you to the audience for some phenomenal questions, and I'm sorry we couldn't get to all of them here. The final part of this presentation is we're all going to speak a bit more about products and services that our various companies offer. And I'm going to start with you, George. Tell us a bit more about ShipBob. I know you've already spoken about ShipBob a bit, but there's still some folks who may not be that familiar and are really wondering, should I give ShipBob a try?
Yeah, absolutely. So our goal is to help e-commerce businesses be more successful online. And a lot of merchants, when they're starting a business, don't necessarily think about perhaps how important it is to hit modern customer expectations about getting the products that you're selling into your customer's hand. But customer expectations have been widely set by the bigger players in e-commerce, the Amazons, the Nordstroms, the Dick's Sporting Goods, where if you order something online, the shipping's going to be free and it's going to arrive in 1 to 2 days at your doorstep. But if I am a merchant and I'm blowing up on Instagram or some social media and I'm selling vegan handbags on the Lower East Side of Manhattan, or I have a cosmetics company in Los Angeles, I'm usually limited to shipping my products from one location to all over the country. And if I want to get it there within 1 or 2 days, it needs to be very close by or I'm shipping it air. And that's not very scalable. So ShipBob addresses these problems in 2 ways. We've built out technology that integrates with over 32 different e-commerce apps and platforms. So our technology is the best in the e-commerce business and makes and allows you to have everything under one platform for the most part that you need to know about the shipping and logistics part of your business. And we've also built out a network of 11 fulfillment centers, 10 in North America and 1 in Europe, that allow our customers to, we will work with customers to look at their last 3 to 6 months of order data and recommend based on what our data analytics team believes in the algorithm that we've run. This is how you can maximally distribute your inventory or optimally distribute your inventory to be more successful online. And why that would make you more successful is that you're no longer shipping, say, from Los Angeles to Florida and to New York and to Chicago, and it's taking 3, 4, 5, 6 days for the product to get there and costing you X amount of money. Your products would be shipped zone 1, zone 2 on a consistent basis, which would 1, hit customer expectations about being delivered to their door within 48 hours, and 2, it's a cheaper cost of shipping on a per order basis, which, after hundreds and thousands of orders, adds up to a pretty good amount of money that the business can plow back into other aspects of their business, and also is a competitive advantage against other companies in the same sector that are not utilizing that strategy.
Well, there's never been a better time to give ShipBob a try, that's for sure. And it's clearly going to pay for itself many times over between the saved shipping costs and the better customer experience, which will increase customer loyalty among many things. All right, Matt, over to you. Tell us a bit more about who you guys like to work with at Second Marathon and the services that you provide.
Yeah, sure. So, we touched on this a little earlier, but, I started Second Marathon about 3 years ago, really as a way to support the next generation of e-commerce brands in a similar capacity as myself and my business partner, who's based in the Bay Area. We're helping brands sort of scale and develop their operations from within. So some of the startups that I've been a part of, like Rent the Runway and Birchbox, and my partner, previously ran supply chain at Everlane, and he was at Venmo before that. We've had some really interesting experiences helping these now household names, but at the time, very small startups really grow and expand their operations from within. So when I started Second Marathon about 3 years ago, I really wanted to help, many e-commerce brands, many of which are digitally native brands, helping them with their shipping and fulfillment challenges. So, we tend to work almost exclusively with small and mid-sized businesses. We don't work with, Fortune 500 companies or very large publicly traded companies, although we certainly hope that the brands we work with become that one day if that's what they choose. But we're really focused on that sort of 0 to 60 phase. So working with brands from their pre-launch days, even before they've started generating revenue, through their emerging years. Most of the brands we work with are under a couple of years old, maybe 2 or 3 years old. They're fairly lean. We work with a couple brands where they have less than half a dozen employees, and they use mostly agencies and consultants to kind of plug in the gap. And that's how we work often with brands. So we tend to be very focused on supply chain and logistics, so helping them build their in-house operations if they want to do it themselves, or find 3PLs like ShipBob if they choose to outsource the fulfillment, or migrating from one 3PL to another. We help a lot of brands negotiate their shipping rates. So, especially this year as e-commerce has grown significantly, brands have come to us asking for help, renegotiating their FedEx agreements or UPS agreements. We spend a lot of time helping brands expand internationally. So maybe they want to sell into Canada or other international countries, helping them with their packaging. So, we partner with companies like Packlane to help them think through what their branded packaging strategy looks like. So, it's a little bit of everything. We often serve as, essentially an extension of the brand. So, we call it the in-house model, where we are effectively their operations team, sometimes taking on email addresses with their domain and really ingraining ourselves in your culture. So yeah, that's a little bit about Second Marathon, and would be really honored and excited to work with any of you all today.
That's fantastic. Sure, we can all use a little bit of extra help with our shipping. So head on over to secondmarathon.com for that one. We have a lot of Packlane customers who've joined us today. I'm going to give some quick company updates on our new production timelines and key holiday order dates you do not want to miss. Like many of you, we have seen a surge in demand in the midst of COVID and increased online ordering. Of course, we always see demand during Q4, but we're anticipating seeing more demand than ever before. Production turnaround times always increase a bit during the holidays, and they are going to get a little bit longer this year. We are bringing you a new option, which is economy. So standard turnaround time is 13 to 17 days. Economy is 18 to 24 days. And by the way, if you order economy, you will save 10% on production. So we are encouraging that. Rush is still available, and that is 10 to 12 days. And as a reminder, production turnaround times are independent from shipping times. Shipping times vary a great deal depending on your location. So here are the key holiday order dates based on standard production. If you need boxes for Black Friday, place your order by October 16th. For Christmas, get it in by October 28th. And if you're creating custom branded boxes for a New Year's event, then be sure to order by November 14th. And that concludes today's webinar. Thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any additional questions, you can email george@shipbob.com or matt@secondmarathon.com. Thanks everyone, and have a great rest of your day.